So we're going to be using the half scale block just because this is just a demonstration for the technique. But obviously you're going to choose whether you want to use this method, the wing seam method, or the princess seam method on your own bodice blocks to be making your dresses, which we'll continue with in the coming weeks. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've obviously printed out my my block, but if you've traced it off, obviously on the front here we've got a grain line, but we're just going to mark our grain line on the back as well, which is going to be in line with the centre back. So I'll do mine in pen. So I'm just going to go using my grading square, so you can use your pattern master, and just making sure that it's going to be a straight line. So I'm going to do this on 2 areas of each pattern piece, so that when we're dividing them into the 2 parts, so we're going to end up with 4 pattern pieces, we've got the grain line on both pieces already. So I'm just going to mark it on the other side of the back piece as well. So I've got 2 grain lines, and I've already got 1 grain line on my front piece, so I'm just going to mark it on the other side, on the side body part. And it's going to be the same direction as the other grain line, obviously. So I've got my grain lines on both pieces in 2 places. So we're going to have side front, centre back, and side back eventually. So the next thing we're going to do, now obviously we're working in a half scale, so we're going to be using half the measurements that we would usually use on the full scale pattern. So usually you would be coming down 10 centimetres on the front part from your shoulder on the armhole. But seeing as it's a half scale, I'm going to choose half that, which is 5 centimetres. So I'm going to measure 5 centimetres down from the shoulder, which takes me to just above my armhole notch here. So I'm just coming just above, so that's 5 centimetres down. I'm also going to mark on my back as well. So that is going to be, usually it would be 8.2 centimetres or 3¼ inches, but I'm going to half that, so it's 4.1 centimetres. So I'm going to put 4.1 on my shoulder seam and then mark at the bottom of my tape. So the back is a little bit higher up than the front. So now I've done my markings, I'm going to draw on my new curve. So this wing seam is coming from the armhole and down into the waist seam, and we're going to eliminate the shoulder darts on both the front and the back eventually. So first I'm just going to draw in my curve. Now you're going to use your French curve or whatever kind of curved surface that you have. I've got my flexi curve here obviously. So I'm just going to come from my marking down to the apex of the dart. So this is where the shoulder and the waist dart meet. And I'm just going to draw to a point. So now I have a curve here. I'm going to do the same on my back piece. So from the point that I marked to the apex of the bust. Okay. So now I've got my 2 curves. We need to mark on new notches. So we're going to do this either side of the apex of the bust point and also the top of the waist dart on the back. So we're going to measure 5 centimetres approximately away from the points, but because this is half scale, we're going to half that, so it's 2½ centimetres either side. So going to measure up from the waist, 2½ centimetres, and I'm just going to put a mark. On the front part, we're going to use one notch, and on the back part, we're going to use a double notch, just because these front side body pieces are going to start to look quite similar. So I'm going to measure up now from my back piece, 2.5 centimetres, and I'm just going to do a double. So now we have those two, one with a double and the front with a single. And then I'm going to measure down from the apex of the bust, 2.5 centimetres. And then I'm going to draw a line that actually crosses the entire waist dart so that it's making a mark on both outer edges, like this. So it's on both sides, because we're going to be eliminating the centre of the dart. Same again on the back. So measure down approximately 2.5 centimetres or 5 centimetres on a full scale, and then intersect both. So those are all of our notches now. So next we're going to be closing the darts on the front and the back. So we're going to start with the front piece. So now that I've got my curve line, this is going to be opening and the shoulder dart is going to close. So first I need to cut into my curve very carefully. And this actually does run into the natural dart, so it's going to be quite a small piece, but it's important that we're as accurate as possible. So that's going down to the apex of the dart. So now I'm actually going to cut down the outer edge of the dart. So it actually has come completely off. And I'm just going to trim down this dart so that I have something I can stick my piece onto. And I'm just going to get some glue. And I know, obviously, it's difficult to know exactly where it's supposed to go, but I know that it's going to be in line with my shoulder. And the way that we can check that this is accurate is that we can remeasure the shoulder from the original pattern with minus the dart. So I'm just going to trim off the little bit of extra at the top here. And this has closed our shoulder dart and opened up the dart in the armhole for us. So we're going to leave this one. Actually, we might as well just turn this now into our two pieces. So now very carefully, I'm going to trim away the dart in the waist, making sure that I go through the apex of the bust carefully, and then I'm going to get rid of this dart completely. Okay, so I've got two pieces, and here I've still got my darts, my notches. So I've got a notch here and I've got a notch up here, and I've got my notches on the waist there too. So we know that they're still going to go together well. So those are those parts. Now moving on to the back. So this one is a little bit trickier because obviously this shoulder dart doesn't come all the way down to the waist dart. So what we're going to have to do is make an incision from this seam up to the bottom of the shoulder dart, so that we can then slash and spread it closed and open up this seam a little bit more, which we're going to use as ease actually. So what I'm going to do using my grading square is from a right angle, so I want it to be flat, the centre on my seam, until it meets the bottom of that dart. And then I'm going to draw a line. So you can see that is now at a right angle. So now I'm going to cut down, my new curved line to the bust, just so I'm leaving this open for an incision. And now I'm going to cut from the front of my shoulder dart to the bottom. And then I'm going to cut up this line that I've created so that I can open up the seam, closing the shoulder dart at the same time. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue. And again, you'll be able to check the measurements at the end of the shoulder just to make sure. So this has come away, but we can just pivot so that it's closed. Now there is a little bit of a step or an angle in this shoulder, but we'll be able to smooth that out at the end. But you can see now that we have closed the shoulder dart and opened it up in the centre back piece, which we will then mark as ease when we are coming to tracing off our pattern pieces. So I'm just going to finish this off now by following the curve round to the outer edge of the waist dart and then trimming away the dart on the other side. So we are left with just 2 pattern pieces which we need to add the seam allowance to. Okay, so I've got my notches, I've got my shoulder darts closed, and I'm ready to trace off my pattern pieces. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the front pieces. I'm just going to use my pencil. And it's important that these lines are smooth as possible. And as usual, mark in all of the notches that were on the original pattern, so the one in the armhole and the one in the side seam. And if you've got any flat surfaces, so the side seam and the hem, you can just mark those in with straight lines using your ruler. Actually, this bottom is slightly curved, so I'm just going to accurately use my pencil and mark in my new dart, my new notches. So we've got 2, and then also the grain line. Just going to come a bit further forward. Now, you're not going to be able to see this yet, but I'm now adding 1 centimetre seam allowance all around. So obviously this new seam that we're creating needs to have seam allowance so that we can stitch it together. So add your centimetre seam allowance everywhere. Mark in my notches. Okay. And obviously when you're going around a curve like this, you can just use your ruler and move it bit by bit, 1 centimetre around, and then either join it up with your French curve or your flexi curve, or you can just carefully cut following the dotted lines that you're creating with your pencil. sure I've got a nice sharp corner there. Okay. So I'm just going to label this now. So this is my front, side, body, or SB. And it's wing seam, half scale, bodice block. Obviously it is from a size 12, so you might want to put that. Maybe your name. And then we need to mark our grain line on again. And you would obviously put how many to cut as well. So you just continue to trace off all the pieces and add your seam allowances. Mark on the top and the bottom, and then I'll just draw a straight line with my ruler later. Sorry, that's actually the piece I need. This is my notches on. And my notch. And the grain line. And then you just add seam allowance to all of the sides again, and your grain line, and mark on the information that it's the centre front piece and how many to cut, what the seam allowance is, what it is, and you do that to the back as well. So let's assume that I've done that one already. So with this back piece, with the shoulder dart that we've taken out that's opened up here, this we're just going to use as a smooth line. We're just going to create a smooth line. And then that's going to be marked as ease. So when we're constructing it, that would just give a little bit more room in the chest. So on this shoulder, I'm just going to straighten out the slight curve in there. Yeah. Make a smooth line. Mark your grain line, and marking the two either side of the opening, so that's going to be where our ease is. Mark your double notch and your waist notch. And then you can draw a smooth line. And again, mark all your information on, centre back piece, how many you're going to cut, the grain line, you know the drill. All your notches. Ease. And then your centimetre seam allowance everywhere. And that is you finished. You'll end up with 4 pieces, all with seam allowance, and then you'll be ready to scale this up to a full scale. So you're going to be using your own bodices with the measurements that you took for yourselves, and then we're going to use this to make your dress. So you can make a decision whether you want to use this method, which is called the wing seam, or the princess seam method that you've seen already. But yeah, that's the end of this video.